New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted essence. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here.
I am so glad you're here. Welcome. I'm your host, Catherine Duca, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A podcast to help you learn how to have the highest regard for yourself, how to live from a place of self-respect and self-love, and how to make yourself a priority in your own life. Meet me here each week for curated tips and strategies designed to help you drop your psychological masks, or at least loosen them a bit, connect with your truest essence, and simply live life more easily. Because when we do these things, we inevitably and effortlessly and naturally and organically give others permission to do the same. We have more room, more openness, and more generosity to love one another. And isn't that a beautiful thing? Tonight's topic is one that I find very interesting, and I was moved to talk about this tonight. And it's entitled, You Can't Love Anyone Until You Respect Yourself. You can't love anyone until you respect yourself. I bet you thought I was going to say, you can't love anyone until you love yourself, which is practically a cliche, but it's extremely true. It is extremely true. But I think there is something else at the core of not only how we see ourselves and how we love others, but whether or not we can actually allow ourselves to live the kind of life we want to live. And what is that? Something else? I believe it's self-respect. And I believe that self-respect underlies even self-love. So self-love puts us in the core, but self-respect puts us in the core of the core. So I want to begin by defining these terms because although they are interconnected and absolutely fundamental to living our lives well, they're not exactly the same thing. And the distinction, I think, is an important one. So I want to get into defining these terms, self-love and self-respect. And as we go, I invite you to interact with me if you're comfortable. Comment in the chat section, ask me a question. You can email me if you're not really that comfortable putting something in the chat. That's totally fine. I love all my introverts. I'm an introvert myself. You can email me at Catherine@catherineduca.com and ask me anything about this topic. As I like to say, don't ask me how to change your carburetor. I cannot do that. But by all means, let's interact and co-create what promises to be a very interesting and meaningful conversation. I look forward to seeing your contributions here. So we're going to get into definitions, but even before I do that, I want to refer to something I brought up last week. if you were with me in the conversation a week ago, I talked about myself, actually. I shared a little bit of my experience leading up to the podcast. I said that I was especially nervous, anxious last week. And truth be told, all the weeks since the beginning, I've been doing this now about a month or so. And although I uh, am used to these kinds of things, and, I've been on television and the radio and whatnot, whenever I have to expose myself, and being on a podcast is, of course, exposing oneself, I am thrown right back into Our Lady of Mount Carmel Grammar School. And I am once again in front of the classroom, and I am afraid that I'm going to freeze, or, as happened one time, stutter out of nowhere and get punished and have the whole class be punished. So this for me is like returning to the scene of the crime, if you will. And when I shared this last week, I felt instantly better. But, well, not but, I should say, and in the days leading up to tonight, I not only felt much less anxious, I felt actually eager to be here with you tonight. So, frankly, taking a risk and sharing my vulnerability with you, and you, from what I read in the comments and even later with emails and DMs, you were very accepting of what I shared, not judgmental, very encouraging. So you gave me what we call in psychology a corrective emotional experience. Have you ever heard that term? A corrective emotional experience. What that means is we have an experience in our current life that mimics or reminds us of an unpleasant or painful experience from the past. But the outcome this time is much different. The outcome is positive. So you listeners, my dear listeners, you gave me a corrective emotional experience last week, and it stayed with me, and it's with me tonight. And I thank you for that. And, as I mentioned in my work, my clients, if any of them are listening, can attest to this. I'm that spin instructor. I am working out with you. I'm, I'm here alongside you, and I'm working on myself at the same time, kind of in the background, of course. When I talk to my clients, it's all about my clients, but I'm also aware that I have an open tab all the way in the back, and I'm getting stronger along with you. I'm getting more open along with you. I am practicing daring to be vulnerable right along with you. I'm trying not to keep my masks. I have many, incidentally. I'm trying to keep my mask of perfectionist a little looser around the edges, if you know what I mean. My mask of I'm okay, even if I'm, trembling inside. I'm okay. Never let them see you sweat. I never really liked that saying, but I found myself stepping into that and hiding my bit of anxiety. So you've helped me with that, and I hope to help you. I say all the time, the information that I impart here and other places too, in my workshops or in the book that I wrote, Unmasked, it's really not original material. It really isn't. I don't know if there are any more original ideas, frankly, but in the realm of psychology, it's pretty, this stuff has been around as long as human beings have been around. And yes, research has gotten more sophisticated. We understand brain research. We understand neurobiology much better. We understand trauma much better. But fundamentally, humans today are not much different than humans decades ago. But I think when the teacher, what's that expression? When the teacher is ready, no, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, I hope that if the way I package this material and my voice lands with you and helps you, I very much hope that this is a space you can turn to and count on to begin to entertain the idea of being your real self, even if it means you're a little vulnerable and you're a little raw. Time and a place, of course, but this is kind of a laboratory, if you will. That's how I look at it. So let's be together, let's stay connected, let's support each other, and let's open our hearts and minds as we look into self-respect and self-love. Okay, so now I'm working with a couple of different devices, so I hope you just can bear with me. Okay, self-love and self-respect. I hope that my story is a bit illustrative of self-love and self-respect as I get into it. I'm going to refer to it again, not to be overly self-indulgent, but for the purposes of explaining. So self-love refers to, let's have a split screen, self-love on one side, self-respect on the other. Self-love refers to the fondness, if you will, the acceptance and compassion we have for ourselves. The fondness, acceptance, and compassion we have for ourselves. It's like a tender spot toward ourselves and for ourselves. It's the ability to treat ourselves with the sort of kindness and understanding we would afford a close friend, or perhaps even a child. Self-love involves acknowledging our strengths, our weaknesses, our imperfections, our mistakes, our flaws, our foibles, our flops, and being kind to ourselves as we're doing it. It's easy to love ourselves when we're being successful and everything is going our way. But the real challenge is, can we love ourselves through a disappointment? Can we love ourselves through something that we did that was, say, less than stellar, didn't quite match the vision of what we held for ourselves? Can we love ourselves through that? Because that's the real question. So that's self-love. Self-respect, on the other hand, is about having a deep regard for ourselves, a deep regard for our values and our boundaries. It's the ability to say no when necessary, stand up for ourselves, assert our needs, and this is so important, maintain our integrity. Maintain our integrity. Integrity is such a powerful word, isn't it? When you think about standing in your integrity, you're standing in your values, you're standing in your conviction, right? Self-respect involves recognizing our worth, being honest with ourselves, and again, that includes our flaws, especially our flaws, and taking responsibility for our actions. Frankly, it's what makes feeling comfortable in our own skin possible. So, if you're following me with this split screen, self-love is the tender-hearted side of things. It's the side where we say to ourselves, I've done the best I can, and that's okay. Right? I made a mistake, but I'm human. It's okay. Self-respect sounds like we're preserving our dignity and our character. And self-respect sounds something like, I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect by myself as well as by others. I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect by myself and by others. So you start to hear the difference. One protects the heart. In fact, I like to say self-respect is the bodyguard of the heart. And self-love, I want to go back to that. Self-love is not sloppy. You know, when I talk to clients about giving themselves a break if they've made a mistake or they feel they've disappointed someone, I always have to remind them it's not being sloppy. By that, I mean, self-love doesn't give us a pass to be careless, be, half-hearted, be sloppy, and then just clean it up after with, well, I did the best I could. That's really not what self-love is. Self-love holds us accountable, okay? And self-respect does as well. So these two things go hand in hand. And if we wish to be someone who is self-actualized, if we want to be comfortable in our own skin, steer the course of our own lives, define ourselves on our own terms, we need these two, self-love and self-respect. So just hold on a second. I noticed a comment from Mitzi. Mitzi says, self-respect begins becoming free of self-judgment. Mitzi, absolutely 100%. Self-respect begins becoming free of self-judgment. Yes, because we are honoring ourselves. We're honoring ourselves. If we're busy, and look, I get caught up in this as well as anyone, but, I try to bring myself back. When that critical voice kicks in, when we find ourselves being harsh with ourselves, because let's face it, many of us learned how to be harsh with ourselves. We downloaded that perhaps from caregivers, parents, teachers, society. We think we are like a drill sergeant in the Marine Corps. Like we're going to criticize ourselves into doing better. We're going to pressure ourselves into doing better. We feel that if we criticize ourselves enough, Mitzi, tell me if we're on the same wavelength here, that if we criticize ourselves more and more, then we will buck up. But guess what? Life is not the Marine Corps. And we don't have to do that. Respecting ourselves, it's actually harder. It's actually harder. It's easy to judge ourselves. It's easy to criticize ourselves. It's harder to show ourselves respect and be accountable and try to do better next time without being a drill sergeant. We have to be more adept if we're going to go that route. But that's the route that will get us deeper into integrity and ground us as a more self-actualized person. And again, and the beauty of doing this work is the more we do this with ourselves, the more our vibration lifts. What do I mean by vibration? I mean, you walk into a room or you meet someone for lunch and your energy just emits this vibration of, I respect myself. I take care of myself. I'm honest with myself. I can handle being honest. I don't have to run from myself. I don't have to pretend I have it all together. Podcast, right? I can be real. And what that does in an instant is it gives the other person whom you're having lunch with permission to be themselves. You make the atmosphere much safer and much more comfortable, not only for yourself, but for other people. So this week, it might be interesting to consider that you might be someone else's corrective emotional experience. Wouldn't that be something? Think about that. Your acceptance of someone, your word of kindness, your word of forgiveness giving grace might be just the thing that someone needs when they're in their head thinking, oh, this interaction is going to go badly. I put my foot in my mouth and it's going to be just like at school. Or it's going to be just like when my father said this or my mother did that and she flew off the handle. You can give someone a completely different ending by saying, that's okay. That's okay. I know who you are. No worries. And mean it. And mean it. It's a gift. It's a gift that you give yourself when you take a risk, but you also give the other person a gift when you take a risk because you open the door. You open the door. Now, there are unintended consequences of lacking in self-respect. And when I say lacking, that's such a, I don't know, that's such a, maybe a negative connotation. No one means to undervalue themselves or devalue themselves. None of us intends to do that. So no shade, no criticism. We just want to understand it. For many of us, maybe most of us, we learned somewhere along the line, or we concluded or interpreted that we are not all that worthy of love. So we internalize that, and that got woven into the fabric of our being, right? But I have to say, it's nearly impossible. It really is. It's nearly impossible to have the kind of relationship most people want. If one or both people lack self-respect, it's almost impossible to have a fulfilling relationship or a balanced relationship or an open, completely honest relationship if one or both parties lacks self-respect. I'll tell you why in a moment, but I see another comment. Janine writes, sometimes people fear that self-respect may lead to a kind of arrogance. Oh, I love this, Janine. Thank you. But I find that it actually leads to greater humility. Let me read that again. Sometimes people fear that self-respect may lead to a kind of arrogance, but I find it actually leads to greater humility. Janine, I couldn't agree more. Self-respect is not superiority. Self-respect doesn't lord itself over anyone's head. It doesn't take hostages. It doesn't ask for ransom. It doesn't put one above anyone else. In fact, as you say, it's actually an exercise in humility. And each of us is entitled to take care of ourselves and be in our dignity and be in our integrity. So, in my life, I'm not the only one in integrity. I make it a point, a conscious point to, and if this isn't in the front of my mind, it's always in the back, to give anyone I'm interacting with the room for them to take care of themselves. And I want them to know it. I want the people in my life to know that it's okay to disappoint me. I mean, would I like it? Will I like it? Of course not. Might it pinch? It might. It might. But, this is a two-way street. And if I have the room and the right to take care of myself, I understand that everyone else has that same right. So Janine, 100%, it's not arrogance at all. It actually leads to greater humility and openness and acceptance. So back to the lack of self-respect. I just want to say this before we take a break. When we sort of hide behind a certain image or a mask, we have a barrier up. we have a closed door. So if I learned that I'm not all that worthy of love, I'm going to protect myself behind that door. I don't want anybody throwing arrows at me, even if no one intends to. But, the world has arrows, right? I have to learn how to protect myself, but I want to do that in my life without closing myself off. Because here's the thing about that door, it only opens from the inside. No one can break down that door. So if you're hiding or you have, a barrier up, no one can break that down. So if you're behind that wall waiting for someone to come and love you through that wall, it's probably not going to happen because it opens from the inside. So think about that. Okay. I think this is a good time to take a break. And when we come back, I'll talk a little more about this and I'll take a question or two. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network.
I've been thinking, this volunteer dinner deserves a standout video, something with real impact. But hiring a big production team for just one video? The cost would be huge.
I get it. But have you thought about New Thought Media Network? They do amazing work beyond just broadcast programming on YouTube. They actually specialize in high-quality, one-off productions for events like ours. And I heard they're super affordable.
Really? I didn't realize they did that. So they focus on quality without the premium price tag.
Exactly. Plus, Dr. Robert runs the whole thing, and he's all about making great media accessible. We could get the professional look we need without going overboard on costs.
This sounds perfect. Let's get in touch with Dr. Robert and see if they can work their magic for us.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted essence. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here.
And we're back. If you're just joining, we are talking about the difference between self-respect and self-love, because we cannot love anyone unless and until we respect ourselves or respect ourselves enough. I want to now turn to the unintended consequences of not having enough self-respect. And I offer this not to be a downer, but to be realistic about how consequential it is that we deliberately create more self-respect for ourselves. This isn't just a nice to have. In my clinical work with individuals and couples, I find that a lack of self-respect really ripples out across relationships, and it really causes some unintended consequences, as I mentioned before. And so I want to run through them because they're not nice to haves. Again, they're what I would consider non-negotiables. Do they take work to cultivate? So, self-respect and self-love? Yes, of course they take work. But there's two kinds of work when it comes to self-awareness and self-actualization. There's uphill battle work, but actually, the kind of work I do with people is not uphill battle. It's actually wonderful work. It's rewarding, gratifying work. You are your instrument. You are your instrument. And how fine-tuned an instrument you are matters. It matters for so many reasons. It matters because it has to do with how connected you are to yourself, how connected you are to other people, and perhaps most of all, I would say most of all in my life and how I try to live it, it has to do with your connection to the divine, to source. So if we're blocked off from source, we're going to be blocked off, sort of coming and going. So let me run through these unintended consequences. Emotional numbness. We can feel disconnected from our emotions, leading to a sense of emptiness or flatness or numbness. Loss of identity. We can struggle to define ourselves, our values, our passions. We can feel kind of like we're in a fog or even disoriented. Of course, people-pleasing and self-sacrificing, right? Because we're not steering our own ship. We're acquiescing to those expectations I talked about last week. We don't know what our Bill of Rights consists of, so we think we're good as long as we're pleasing other people. And guess what? We lose ourselves in the process. Of course, it can create anxiety, depression, mental health struggles. Our relationships are not going to be as rewarding or satisfying as they can be. In fact, it could be quite problematic in relationships. We might be attracted to the wrong kind of person and avoid the right kind of person. Because when we're not in self-respect as much as we need to be, our gauge is off. Our gauge of who is worthy of our trust and who is worthy of our openness and our vulnerability. We can misgauge that and open up to the wrong people and find ourselves actually in some sort of toxic relationship. Not good, right? This can create physical symptoms and illnesses, chronic pain, fatigue. Our immune system can be down. Can lead to addictions and self-destructive behaviors. I said initially, you can numb your feelings if you're not in self-respect because life isn't working and it's a constant source of frustration, or you may be perplexed a lot. You may feel like you're not progressing, like you're stuck. And then that's such an uncomfortable way to feel. It's very common to want to numb that discomfort with a substance, with chocolate cake, with shopping, spending. So this can lead to addictions or dependencies. Again, feelings of disconnection and isolation, feeling separate from the world around you. So this is big. Loss of creativity and inspiration. You feel uninspired, uncreative, and disconnected from your inner source of joy and passion. That is going through life kind of a flat line. Doesn't it sound that way? Which many people are living a flatline existence. Now look, a commercial for a second. We live in a world, we live in a culture, we live in a time that is fraught with all kinds of things right now. The atmosphere, I've said this now every week for the past month. So more than ever, we need to be awake. And I say, if you're not feeling concerned right now, you're not awake. So it's not that being awake is a bowl of cherries all the time. It's not about that. It's about being awake, being real, and then addressing the things we have to address. So this begins to be a layered way of living, right? We incorporate and integrate these skills and these patterns. Hold that thought. I see a couple of more comments. I think I need my glasses for these. Patricia. Hi, Patricia. Patricia says, when both people in a relationship have self-respect, I like the sound of that already, there is hardly anything to fight about. There is no defensiveness, just two people living in their truth. We have to respect that in each other. So very true. So very true. Relationships where both people respect each other have less competition in them. There's less, but what about me? You took from me. I'm the giver, you're the taker. Things are out of whack, imbalanced. So, Patricia, again, I couldn't agree more. When both people have enough self-respect, hardly anything to fight about. There is always going to be negotiation in relationships. There's such a thing as proximity and reciprocity in relationships. Proximity. You and your partner don't necessarily want the same amount of closeness all the time. Someone may want a little more distance. The other person may want a little more closeness. So that's always going to be negotiated. But you're in a zone of closeness. You're not worlds apart. You're not missing in action for one another. So, Patricia, I really like that comment. Thank you. Dawn has a comment also. That's an interesting distinction you make between self-love and self-respect. Obviously related to one another, but also separate. Yes, I'm not fully clear on this. Perhaps sometime you could explain further the distinction between self-love and self-respect. All right, Dawn, hang in there because I'm going to answer a listener's question in a few minutes, and I might be able to expound on something there. So hold tight if you would. Okay. In fact, I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go to a question. Switching devices. Let me see here. Okay. I have a couple of questions here. They're related, but they touch on different things. So I'm going to try something. I'm going to read a couple at a time and see if I can kind of go wide here while I provide some details. Okay. I've been through a traumatic experience and struggle to feel worthy of love and respect. How can I start to rebuild my sense of self-worth and develop a more loving relationship with myself? Okay. Number one. Let's see if I can blend this. I feel like I'm living a life. Oh, now I hear this all the time from clients. I feel like I'm living a life that isn't truly mine, but rather one that meets the expectations of others. How can I start to uncover my authentic values, desires, and goals and develop the self-respect to pursue them? Okay, those are good questions. Thank you. Thank you to people who asked them. So here's the thing that I hope this conversation is helping you with. I said before, we learned this message from someplace, the message that we're not quite worthy. And that became incorporated into our personalities. And so most of us have no idea that that's what's going on with ourselves. We don't know that we suffer from a lack of self-respect. We just think we're stuck or things aren't going our way. So we cannot heal something that we can't pinpoint. So a conversation like this and your participation in it, I think, is the first step toward being aware that this sort of thing might exist in your energy field and in your psychology. So number one, identifying the possibility that this might exist. That goes a long way. Number two, I encourage people to try to get quiet and still sometimes. Now, I know we have a lot of chatter. I know many people struggle with ADD, so their mind is always going. It's kind of noisy, talky in there. So the idea of meditating feels almost impossible for some people. And it can be difficult for many. But I suggest giving it a try anyway, but not in the way in which, you're getting a mat and crossing your legs and doing the Om thing. I would suggest, as a way of getting still and quiet, you go for a walking meditation. What's a walking meditation? Very simple. You go for a walk and you don't really, you don't have the news on or hard rock. If anything, you can listen to a guided meditation or some quiet music, if at all. And the idea is that while you're walking, you're bringing your attention to each step that you take. You're bringing the awareness of all of your senses to the walk. How does your shoe feel as you put your heel, then your toe? Do you hear leaves rustling beneath your sneakers? Is there a breeze on your face? Is it chilly? Is it warm? What's the temperature? What do you smell? What do you observe around you? These are ways to become much more present. And when you're present and you bring yourself, your awareness to each step, you are really in the now. Now, this is all prep work. You see, these questions can't be answered like go to page 38 and there's an answer for these questions. You have to groom your mindset. You have to prepare your mindset. And being still is one way, because in that stillness, we will eventually hear something that is pretty profound. You'll eventually hear your own voice. That's right. You'll eventually hear the voice that perhaps has become drowned out, overwhelmed by other people's needs, expectations, by your busy schedules, on and on and on and on, in many, many layers. So you want to get better and better and better at being still. So this meditation, I think, is an excellent way to groom your mindset. Okay, then I feel like I'm living a life that isn't truly mine. Okay, go back 1 week and download, email me, and I'll get you the download of your Bill of Rights. That Bill of Rights will anchor you in what you may not have really known consciously, but is the fact of the matter. You have certain rights. And if you haven't known them, you haven't lived in them. And if you haven't lived in them, you don't know where to pull from. And you don't know where the lines are, where the boundaries are. So we have to kind of get these preliminary things in place in order to then go right in and uncover authentic values, desires, and goals. So the first step towards self-respect is creating an inner atmosphere within your own mind to be able to, in pretty short order, hear your own voice. So let me start there. And I see we have another question. Mitzi says, exactly, a moving meditation being in the moment. Yes, it's a good way to get your steps in, but your vibe on it is, you're not doing this for weight loss or for even fitness. You're doing this for the express purpose of reconnecting with yourself. Reconnecting with yourself. Once you do that, then what I would suggest is this. Monitor every time you say yes when really you wanted to say no. Or you wanted to say, I don't know. Or I don't have an answer for you. Or that doesn't really work for me right now. I need to take care of myself. I'm beginning to feel overwhelmed. Whatever that happens to be, it's about monitoring yourself when you wanted to go left and say no, but you went right and you said, sure, I'll do it. That's a starting point. There's much more to this than saying no, but we're going to begin there. And I would say, and I've done this so many times in my life, I take a piece of paper or my note section on my phone, and I sort of put two columns. And in one column, I put the response I gave to the other person. I said yes when I didn't want to say yes. I said, I'll do this when it came at a great expense to myself. And then in the other column, listen and try to retrieve your truthful answer. You're just going to write this down. You're not going to share it with anyone. So you write down the answer you gave, the response you gave, and you write down the truthful response in your head. And do that a number of times. Do it daily, several times a day, whatever the case, to get accustomed to hearing yourself go against yourself. Because that's what this is. When we're not in self-love or self-respect, we are going against ourselves. And when that is done to an extreme, we call that self-abandonment. Self-abandonment. And it's bad enough that someone may have abandoned us years ago. Now, if we go and abandon ourselves on a daily basis, how is that going to end? Not well, obviously. So you want to get familiar with creating an atmosphere that is more conducive to you hearing yourself, because hearing yourself is the first step toward connecting with yourself. Connecting with yourself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on to these questions because we're going to build on this theme in the weeks to come. And that's what I do in my therapy practice. Each time we meet, we establish something, we learn something, discover something, and then the next week we build upon that and build upon that. And eventually, what is bound to happen is there's a tipping point. A tipping point. And the tipping point goes from how you used to live and how you used to be on automatic pilot, how you used to say yes when you didn't want to, how you used to swallow your voice when you wanted nothing more than to express yourself. We get used to that and we hear ourselves and we begin to befriend ourselves and we begin to move closer to being in our own truth. Doesn't that sound powerful? Being in your own truth. I mean, that's the heart of self-respect. Being in reality, and I would say, respect the reality of what you feel. In time, you will learn, and I always say, of course, a time and a place, but essentially, you will become someone who is rooted in your personal truth. Then, of course, we talk about being tactful. We talk about communication skills. We talk about how to express yourself in a way that does not make the other person feel defensive. So there are those trimmings. But what we're talking about tonight is the essential pillar. There are two, self-respect and self-love, the pillars of being a self-actualized person, a conscious person, a person more connected to your inner world, connected to others, and connected to Source. So there you have it. I'm going to hold on to these questions and revisit them as we add more and more layers to these lessons. So I think I covered the chat. You can email me anytime with questions about anything I've spoken about. If you have insights, if you have other ideas that you would like me to talk about, email me anytime at Catherine@catherineduca.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you experiment with these things, I would love to know. And you'll be helping one another in this growing community. Because, as I say every time, who we think we are isn't necessarily who we truly are at core. I submit that who we truly are at core is infinitely more magnificent than who you and who I think we are. So with this, let's close out the weekend together. Let's enter a new week, new people, new interactions. Let's take all this to heart and let's be mindful of everyone on the chat and one another and people listening who are going to listen to the recording. Let's just have kind of a collective connectivity thing going. Think of each other during the week. I'm going to be thinking of you. If you don't mind thinking of me, that would be good. I could use some positive vibes. And let's really create an atmosphere of love and openness and respect and kindness and integrity and dignity wherever we go. So, dear listeners, I wish you a good night. Drift off to sleep comfortably, as I say every week. If you're worried about something, let it go for tonight. Just let it go. It will be there in the morning. Tackle it when you're fresh. For now, let yourself sleep. I went to a show last night. Can I find it? I went to a show with some dear friends. We saw A White Christmas. And one of the lines at the end of the show was, and I might use this as my sign off each week. Tell me if you like it. If you're worried and you can't sleep, count your blessings instead of sheep. And so with that, dear listeners, I wish you well. Have a good week. You are listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network. Good night.